anytime, any area of life, it doesn't matter whether it's wrestling, whether it's coaching, whether it's basketball, whether it's teaching in the classroom, driving to work in rush hour traffic. We always perform. The psychology of human performance is one area that I think that can really benefit athletes, particularly wrestlers and coaches, because even coaches, we perform every single day that we show up to practice. We've got to be able to give our best to those boys and girls, those young men and those young women, who we're asking them to give us their best. So today we're going to do a deep dive into some mental reps, if you will, some ways to help strengthen mental toughness and focus. We're going to get those perspectives from current and former athletes, current and former coaches, but then as well we're going to kind of weave in some of the research, some of the scholarship to help present some different angles to it. So we're going to hit it from both sides in today's presentation. So sit back. Thank you for being part of the NWCA, the National Wrestling Coaches Association Tennessee Conference. So I guess I might want to introduce myself. I am Jason Grindstaff. Appreciate you being here. I'm an assistant wrestling coach at Independence High School in Thompson Station, Tennessee. I'm also an associate professor at Cumberland University over in Lebanon, where I teach in our School of Nursing and Health Professions, mostly in sport and exercise science, but my background is in sports psychology, so the psychology of human performance, mental health counseling, and then as well strength and conditioning.
Like in Air Force, there's some really tough competition. And so I got beat up on. And then every day I'd go back to them though, because I knew that that's what I needed to do to get better.
That's one of those age-old questions is how do you make a kid mentally tough?
Then going to the OTC and only scoring 2 points and how do you not become jaded?
The second year goes by and I didn't make the world team again. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And that summer I really focused on just being a good partner for Tracy Hancock and Colton Schultz, and just learning a little defensive stuff and picking up some offense as I go. And that's what really helped me.
Every kid is wired so different. I mean, I've got 2 of them. Sure. And if I look at one the wrong way, practice is over and I shouldn't have even came in. It's just the way it is. I mean, him and I are just a little different, and
Sure.
It's tough. Coaching is hard, man.
I'm talking step by step, minute by minute. It's something I learned along the way. I had a lot of great coaches through my years here at Cumberland that helped me build this visualizing technique.
Redshirted for the year I transferred, to get with Terry. And that's its own thing. Terry, the Terry Brands experiment.
Sure.
That was we felt like experiments.
Right out of the gate, let's jump into our first rep, which is hope is not a plan of attack. I can't tell you how many times I hear athletes talk about these magical goals, almost as if somebody's going to bring a magic wand and just wave it over your head and zap you, and it's going to happen. Hoping to make the varsity lineup, wishing that we could beat a district rival or win state, or dreaming to earn that college scholarship. In of itself, these aren't bad things to envision. All goals start out with a vision, but what goals are is it's a tangible action plan for moving forward, making something a vision and making it a reality. Coach Crowley over at Cumberland University has some great insights into actually making those goals tangible and the importance of getting feedback from a coach in that process. Let's actually hear from him. I'll see you on the other side.
College career, but was there ever looking back, was there ever a real hinge or turning point that you feel like you really bought into that mental process?
I believe it was probably the beginning of my junior year.
Okay.
The beginning of my junior year was definitely a turning point for me. Coach Hicks had just got hired, and he was preaching the things that really, some things that he was preaching really stuck out to me as being realistic goals that one of my status, which was not very successful at the time, could accomplish. It was like a ladder. Don't dream big, dream realistic.
It's like he helped you visualize that ladder, and which had higher rungs on the ladder than you ever pictured.
Correct.
Were you ever like, man, you're crazy? Or did you buy in from the very beginning?
I bought in from the very beginning. because I had some success in my
Gotcha.
sophomore year. I had a couple 1-point losses to the eventual national champion, and it was like, at my best, I could wrestle, I could compete with those guys. But at my worst, I would still be losing to kids that I shouldn't be losing to. And so I had some talent. It was just unrefined. And it was what I was thinking to myself. And I needed somebody who could really help me, usher me into refining my technique, refining my mental, to being able to compete with those guys.
So Coach Crowley had some really interesting perspectives on the goal-setting process. And actually the research would support what Coach said about getting feedback from a coach, from a peer, from a mentor, somebody that you trust and look up to. It could be an upperclassman, maybe you're a freshman looking up to a senior on the team. Maybe it's asking that assistant coach. Maybe it's asking mom or dad, or that, somebody, a parent figure in your life. Hey, what do you think of this goal? So in this case, what we heard from Coach Crowley was that Coach Hicks helped provide a vision what was possible, and they talked about, don't even worry about the top of the ladder. Focus on that very next rung of that ladder, and how can we get there? Let's make that a reality.
But the biggest thing is I think communication, talking to your wrestlers, establishing a clear set of goals, what you expect from them and out of them, getting them to realize how important goal setting is in their lives. And so I think if you can, as a coach, really just be, what we're supposed to be, which is a mentor, that can really go a long way. Just listening to kids. Sometimes they're not being listened to at home, and so they need somebody to be there for them. And I think that helps a lot. Somebody, they grow to trust you, you grow to trust them. And I think that that can really, really benefit the kid. He's going to, quote unquote, walk through a wall for you.
Keep up with.
Yeah.
So, well, one of the things that I took away from what you were just mentioning there is like, it's this idea of mental toughness. It's like doing things you don't want to do.
Exactly.
Just doing it.
Did I just sit on the couch and play video games? And sometimes I've done it sometimes, but and then whenever I change that mindset of like go out and just go on a little run or go on a little walk, I got myself better today. So just like when you go on a run, we went on a run today. I never ran, I used to never run, and today we had a 5.5 mile run this morning with hill sprints. And in Colorado, I learned I would run and I would walk sometimes because I just wasn't there. And my coach, Mohammed, he's like, just keep picking your feet up, and it could be a slow pace, but you're still going faster than what you're doing. And just like that mindset really helped me throughout lifting and then wrestling, and then all of a sudden it just all comes together, and it really helps me just in life in general through school. And just as long as you do the workout, you got to just look in yourself and see if you got better from 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, your old.
Rep number 2, moving right along. Know your why. Coaches are notorious, and I think this is human nature though. Coaches are notorious for almost projecting or imprinting, if you will, our goals onto athletes. We come in with this mindset that we want to train state champions. We want to train, and we want to win that team state title. We want to place top 4 at the state duels, and we make the assumption that all of our wrestlers, everyone on our team, those young men and those young women, that they dream just as big as we do. I'm not sure that that's exactly the reality. Let's hear from some wrestlers.
Because it helps me maintain body weight and it keeps my body in shape.
I wrestle because it teaches a lot of life lessons and it's fun to do.
I wrestle because I used to jiu-jitsu.
I wrestle because it builds great relationships with people.
I wrestle to build confidence.
I wrestle because the team's like a family to me. It's very fun and it builds character.
Go.
I like to spite people.
One sentence on why I wrestle. All right.
Go.
It just builds character for me, and I just like the leadership of it.
Don't say that, man.
Why do you wrestle?
Because I get nachos out of it.
I wrestle because I think you learn a lot about yourself from losing.
All right. Why do you wrestle?
Because he said so. I wrestle because it's a team sport and it teaches me a lot of things.
Make me a better person.
I like to kick some ass.
Student athletes, especially at the middle school and high school level in the sport of wrestling, have all kinds of motivations. We just heard from some of them that they had motivations that range from they're there because of the social aspect. Their friends are there doing it. They want to develop leadership skills. It develops character, builds those kind of dispositions. I'm not sure we can approach it the exact same way. I'm not sure we should coach those athletes the exact same way. I encourage you, ask your athletes, why do you compete? Let's actually hear from John Davis, a 3-time Southern Conference champ and 3-time NCAA qualifier from the University of Tennessee, about why he wrestled, and especially why he was wrestling at the collegiate level.
The conference was just a step. It was all about being the top guy, period. It didn't matter if it's the top guy in the conference. It didn't matter if it was the top guy in the room. It didn't matter if it was the top guy in, at anything other than all the way. I want to be the top guy of the top guys.
There you go.
And, to do that, we had to wrestle the toughest competition. We had to train like we were the toughest competition. You can't just sit there and say that, I'm a tough guy. You got to be a tough guy.
It's kind of the Gene Mills mentality. He talked about not just being the best in the country. He wanted to be the best in the world. He didn't want to be just the best. He wanted to be the best in the entire universe. The top guy of the top guy. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. To me, if we're talking about it that way, it's I want to be the best, and then at the end of the day, even if I am the best, well, then that means I need to beat who I was the day before.
It's going to be fun, but there's some bumps in the road where I get a little bit too intense, and kids don't like it, and they'll pull themselves away from me. And not being on the staff for the last few years, stepping in this year, it's going to be a challenge. I know the ones that I can go to and say, it's time to go. You got to step it up. And then there's those others that if I say it, they're going to shut me off. And it's just damage control then. And that's where I've got to really be careful.
So not even 20 seconds into the match, I throw the dude for 4. I'm like, wow, I can actually beat this dude. And it clicked in my mind too late. And I ended up losing 4-10, but just like that meant, just from wrestling that match, I had a coach come up to me after, and he was like, look, you're there, you just gotta put your mind to it and you can compete with these guys. I ended up wrestling a guy blood rounds to go for a medal match. He tagged me earlier in the year. I ended up beating him 5-4, end up placing him 4th at senior nationals, and I'm like, wow, I'm actually doing this. And then go to Bill Farrell in New York, and I wrestled a number Lucas Sheridan from Army. He's ranked number 2 in the country, and I lose to him 4-5, but I'm close, but I'm not there, and it's just something in the back of my head that's I'm close. I just gotta keep training. And once you start putting the pieces together, everything is going to be awesome. So that's the moment I'm waiting for right now.
For our third rep, I think anybody in any endeavor in life that has wanted to be good or great understands the importance of, if you want to beat the best, you have to study the best. Well, what do we mean by that? Nick Winkleman, he's actually the head of athletic performance and science for the Irish Rugby Football Union. I actually listened to him on a really cool podcast. It's a great podcast. I'd encourage you to check it out. It's called Perception in Action. But anyway, he was interviewed for one of these podcasts for actually a book that he had wrote. We'll talk about that later. But specifically on this segment of the podcast, he talked about sort of this idea of modeling the great. The best of the best in any field of study. In this case, if we want to be one of the best wrestlers, if we want to be one of the best coaches, if we want to be one of the best teams, that in many ways we need to reverse engineer those great teams. So what does that exactly look like? Well, he described kind of a 3-step process there. First of all, we need to identify what an expert looks like. So who are the experts in the field? Who are those great coaches that we look up to? Who are the best teams out there? Who are the best wrestlers? We need to then, in step 2, target mechanisms that underlie that performance. And there are very specific ways that we can do that. We'll touch on those in just a moment. But in step 3, then we need to do the retrospective work to see how those mechanisms, those components of the skill were actually developed over time. So first of all, this idea of looking at the experts. Again, I hope I'm not understating this, that, this talk today is not just about developing mental toughness and focus in wrestlers. It's just as applicable to coaches. Look at the best referees that are out there across the state, across the country, across the world. Like, they are professionals themselves, and they deal with the mental aspects of the sport as well. So we can identify in almost any endeavor who are the experts. And when we look up to them, now we need to start identifying, okay, well, what specifically underpins their performance? I get it that most coaches out there aren't going to have at their disposal eye tracking, software. They're not going to be able to do biomechanical analysis like you can do at a larger university, where you can do, pretty concrete empirical studies. But there are certainly practical ways that we can do this. Certainly we can, if we look up to a particular coach, that we want to go watch their practice in the off season, go film their practice, obviously with permission, but ask that coach, hey, can I film you at practice? I'm really interested in, what are some of those things that you do that makes your team great? Film that coach at your own practices. Film those wrestlers. Watch online, Flow, YouTube. There's a lot of great content out there, with free content in a lot of ways. Some amazing stuff out there where we can reverse engineers and watch what they're doing in a very practical approach. The third step there, once we start breaking that down and we start, we've observed them, then we need to do that retrospective work. And we need to then identify, okay, well, what specific mechanisms over time led to that expertise, if you will. And so that can be done, from a research standpoint. We use like journals and interviews and surveys, time course analysis, things like that. But in this case, a very practical approach, I think, would be doing exit interviews. Use exit interviews with your coaches once they're moving on to if you got a coach that was an assistant coach and they're moving on to be a head coach somewhere, they're doing something right. Take them through a set of questions. If you have an athlete in your program that was exceptional, walk them through an exit interview. Pick their brain on what do they think really help get them to that point. And then when we learn about that, we can start implementing that in with our other athletes. Let's hear Nick Boykin's take on really paying attention to the greats.
One of the things that stuck out to me whenever I first moved to Colorado was, when I first moved in, I just came off of a state championship and I was feeling good. And the first 6 months I was there, I scored 2 points the entire time I was there. Like, I went from, going undefeated, to not even winning the not even winning the practice, like. And what helped me the most is whenever you're not on top and you're not on the world team, just like whenever you go be a training partner, you pick out the stuff that helps you defensively and you build upon that. And that's what made me a good wrestler. And that's what I built off of. So,
it humbles you, it levels you, and it
you learn a lot from it. You learn a lot.
But I honestly think, Nick, like, there are some people that are open to learning and some that just sort of stick with, like, hey, this is my way. Like, you've been open.
Yeah, I really opened up. I was hard-headed about it first. I was like,
really?
I'm just a dummy partner. Like, I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of it. And then the second year goes by and I didn't make the world team again. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And that summer I really focused on just being a good partner for Tracy Hancock and Colton Schultz, and just learning a little defensive stuff and picking up some offense as I go. And that's what really helped me.
A tough match.
So you don't just picture the outcome.
it's the steps along the way.
I'm
that get
talking
you to
step by step, minute by minute visualization. So
that's something you learned along the way in college.
it's something I learned along the way. I had a lot of great coaches through my years here at Cumberland that helped me build this visualizing technique. So visualization, I think, is something that athletes do not focus on, and that even Dan Gable used to do, like shadow wrestling and things like that, is to visualize tough matches and visualize yourself working through realistically those tough matches, not just beating a kid up, not just winning the day by a tech fall or a pin, because those are unrealistic at the end of the day. But when you're wrestling a tough match that you know, I can't tell you how many times I visualized that state championship match back when I was going through college. I was just like, realistically, how could I have won the match? And I would just walk myself through winning it.
So visualizing tough matches, tough situations, it's not just about like, I want to win that, that conference title coming up. I want to win nationals coming up. You went back and specifically worked through previous matches.
And because if you don't do that, then it's unrealistic to try to visualize something even greater. So
Every coach from around the country can relate to this. You call your wrestlers in, they're all sitting in the center or stand or whatever, and they're watching. You're going over a new move, or you're refining something that you've already been going over. You show them, you demonstrate, you send them off to go work on it, and you have half of them doing it wrong. You have some that aren't even hitting the correct move, and you get maybe about a quarter of them that are doing it properly. It's infuriating to coaches. You showed it properly, go do it properly. It should be as simple as that. Well, it's not that simple, especially for novices that are still learning in the process. And not just novices, but some of our more advanced wrestlers. We have to realize that they're still in that learning stage, all right? They're not elite. So in a book called The Language of Coaching, I really love this model because Winkerman here describes a 5-step model. And I think there's sort of beauty in models. In this case, we've got a 5-step model for highly effective coaching efficiency. Now, while the model isn't all that new or innovative, some of the steps along the way, the art of coaching, really has some great insights. So this actual steps. Step 1, we need to describe a movement pattern. So we need to break it down into its components and describe that and tell athletes what we want them to be doing. 2, we need to demonstrate. 3, we need to cue. 4, we need to let them go perform. And then 5, we need to provide some sort of evaluation on the process. So that's where the feedback comes in. Describe the movement. Okay, what do we want them to do? That's the science behind it. That's where being an incredibly technical coach comes in, and the importance of being able to do that. And then being able to demonstrate. If you can't show it as a coach, get an athlete that can show it properly. But that's where really technical coaching comes in. It's really step 3 that Winkerman talks about. This is sort of the art of coaching, cueing our athletes. And cues are nothing more than that image or that association that the athlete takes with him or her when they go back and they practice on their own, which leads into perform, which is step 4, and then we review and give feedback. So let's look at maybe an applied example, not necessarily from drilling. One of my favorite cues has to do with how we warm up. Not uncommon, most of you probably warm up in the same way as us. There's a lot of jogging, a lot of dynamic movements, but somewhere along the way we're going to do some sprawl, sprint, shot, sprint, those sort of things to really start activating the body, if you will. Anyway, so one of the cues that I like to give our athletes on, and before I even cue them, I talk to them about, as they're running, describing, the quick turnover of the feet, those first 3 or 4 steps out of the sprawl, making that quick, up quick, out quick. That's all describing the movement. But the cue is where the magic happens. And so if we think of, okay, well, what takes off fast? Well, there's lots of things that take off fast. Motorcycles take off fast, helicopters take off fast, jets take off, but I like the jet. If you think of a jet, we think of a low trajectory, really blasting off with a lot of forward momentum, which is very different than that association, that image of a helicopter. Helicopters have a tremendous amount of force pressuring down, but they go up. Can certainly go fast, but it goes up first. So Our athletes, I like to tell them, take off like a jet. And so once we've described and demonstrated the movement, then the magic happens, like I mentioned, in cueing them. And that's what we send them off with once they go perform. And we don't overcomplicate it. We don't give them a whole bunch of extra noise and wrap it up in a whole bunch of other description or more demonstration. Go let them perform. Then bring them back, review, feedback, and once they've got the basic elements of what we're trying to describe, we coach with cues. Let's actually look at an example of this from a recent practice.
Okay, what's something with your double leg that you feel like you need to improve on?
Staying lower. When I finish my shot, just staying lower.
Okay.
And then finish.
Okay. Who's your drill partner?
Maverick,
Come here. Or Isaac. Okay, sit over here real quick, buddy. All right, so show me just a couple of doubles, maybe at about 50% intensity on Isaac, so I can just see what's going on here. All right, one more time. All right, so come back up. Here's what I want you to think about, all right? Think of, a really tight metal spring. That metal spring, when we press it down, it's got all this energy, it's ready to explode. So what I want you to think of is when you come in here, go ahead and get in position, Isaac. All right, so what I'm noticing here is you're trying to circle this wrestler and then take your shot, and that's fine. What I want to see you do, so let's go back this way. When you circle this wrestler, I want you to load that spring, okay? Because you're kind of just coming down here and it's sort of just down and in. What I want you to do this time is when you circle, I want you to lower your level, load that spring so that you come inside here. Now you're ready to hit that double. All right? Break it down just a little bit slower if you want. Still go through your motion of turning that corner. What I want you to do, as soon as you're ready to level change, load the spring. If you need to pause, that's fine. Then explode. Yeah, that's fine. Good. Come back up. So everything that we're focused on right now is load the spring. Again. Good. And I like that pace. Let's hit 2 more just in a row, just like that, and then we're going to pick up the pace. So you're going to cut the corner, load the spring. One more time. Do this one more time, buddy. Good. Nice. How do you think that felt? Yeah. What felt different to you about that? About that step. Yeah. So that seems like 2 specific things, Tanner, that you can work on. Is as you circle that wrestler, getting your footwork into position. Because if this trail leg step is the one that steps, we're out of position. So it's that first step that brings it here. We're in good position for that blast double, and then as well loading that spring. Good work. Good job, Mike. So what we just saw in the last excerpt was an example of how we can integrate this, this 5-step model. Certainly in this case, our wrestler is not a novice. He's not new to the sport. He's been around a little while. He has a very good double leg takedown. So we don't need to break down every technical component of the double leg. We describe it, and what you saw is that we're already cueing there, which is probably going to be the case for some of your athletes. We certainly step back beyond the describing what we want him to do. Then he goes and demonstrates, or I demonstrated what I wanted him to do, re-cued, and then he goes and performs the movement. And then we ended up with, going back and reviewing, checking in with your athlete, especially the ones that can articulate that back to you. What was that like for you? What did you learn? How can you move forward with this? And really figuring out your style of coaching and figuring out as well, along with how you coach, how you can develop this arsenal of cues to coach more effectively. It makes you a much more efficient coach. You as coaches, you probably have lots of examples of how you like to cue your athletes. Let's look at one more example from a practice and how we were cueing kind of forget, it's not right in front of me. We were either working on arm drags or double legs. But regardless, how are we cueing the step, that penetration step on one of those 2 moves? His leg. My double leg is right here deep. Some of us are stepping so shallow. We were just working with the group over here. How far freaking away is California? arm. Take a California step. So when I go to drag here, California step in. Step as deep as you can. Because when I go to drag, he's probably going to start stepping back, right? I've got to go to him. So when I step here, I'm going to step deep. California step. 1, 2, 3. You weren't always that big rah-rah coach in the corner of the mat, screaming and yelling. Your moments of coaching came off the mat.
It was pretty funny. I'm here. I'm building an addition to my house, so I'm clearing out some drawers, and I found, you go to these tournaments and you got your manila folder they give you with your weigh-in sheets and your information and everything like that. And I found probably 10 of them, and I mean, they are covered front to back with just notes of, match number 2, Kyle Brooks. This is what you did right. This is what you did wrong. So it was, for me, it was really, I'd always heard you should never say something, you can't tell a kid something till 10 minutes after that match is over, because they're never going to remember anything you say. So, it's always important to write down what you want to tell them, and then you approach them later on, or even in practice, the next week, and you say, hey, here's what we need to work on this. You did good here. And I think that's really important.
Rounding out the first half of our reps, talking season goals here. All right. So with our season goals, don't get me wrong. We need season goals. We need to be thinking about stats, records, championships, those sorts of things. But don't forget, as coaches, and especially athletes, when we're trying to teach them how to be more focused at, for example, practice, having those steps along the way. In that case, don't forget about your practice goals. And it's not just our practice goals of, for example, like the technical components, with becoming more offensive on our feet. We need to work that into practice, or think very specifically, okay, how do we become more offensive on our feet? What's going to make that a reality? Do we need to really kind of think about and break down a very specific part of our technique, like our footwork or our position, in order to put ourselves in a position to be more offensive? Thinking about, hey, how can an upperclassman, that returning varsity wrestler as a senior, how can you be a better, more encouraging teammate? For example, you get that awkward sophomore that comes out for wrestling, has never wrestled before. How can you be a more encouraging teammate? Is that good for the team? Yes, it's great for the team. It's great for the sport. You don't know where that awkward sophomore is going to be 2 years from now. Programs around the country have examples of that wrestler going on and winning a state title, medaling at state, going on to wrestle at the next level. So being welcoming, being an encouraging teammate. What if we all worked on it as a team today? What would it do for our mental toughness if we all focused on being more coachable and less defensive when coaches give feedback to the wrestlers? We all have those wrestlers on our team that, they kind of shut down when we kind of get on them. But we get on them because we care.
And now you're coming back and you're at OSU, yes, one of the top programs in the country, but still you see people sort of, giggling and laughing during warm-ups, and that bothers you.
Yeah.
So what's that like from your position? Yes, you're a redshirt freshman. You're technically an underclassman, but
yeah,
that's got to be a really unique position to be in, man.
I just don't think I'm not the best at folk style, which is reasonable. I mean, I've been out of it for 2 or 3 years, but I've been able to experience across the world in different countries, just like the mentality part of preparation for a practice and what to do during a practice and how to get after it. And like taking that back home and seeing the U.S. and how they run things, it's so much different. I mean, you got countries smaller than the state of Tennessee that are bringing world champs to the podium, and it frustrates the coaches. It frustrates a lot of us, but I mean, those are just the little things that I've been able to pick up and notice is just how they prepare. Is really just how they prepare for a practice and how they run.
What is something specific your coaches do that helps you refocus during a really tough match?
A like you'll like say like you're not tired, just like helping me just to calm down and to really like they tell you calm down, react, relax, just to just focus back on what's going on and to just calm my body down.
I think when you think of those rural communities, you usually think of families that are still together, and I think that in itself has more than that hard work that they're doing as a family. I think as long as there's two people in the house, you get a lot more response from kids. You do. If you can get into the family as a coach, you can get so much more out of your athletes. But when you have two families you have to try to get into, I always think if you can get into the family, and they can embrace the values you have, you're going to get something out of that kid, a lot more. Sure. And so those rural communities, usually those families are usually, they stick together. They're running an operation. It's a family operation.
Speaking of focus, we can certainly set those goals. I think a great example of that, many wrestlers, many coaches, as human beings, I think it's just human nature, we have a hard time letting go of mistakes. We get taken down, we pound that fist in the mat, and still that wrestler 20 seconds later is getting ridden out. Working on being able to let go, getting back to the task at hand. I love the win principle. What's important now? It's being able to let go of that mistake, flush it down the drain, throw it in the wastebasket, whatever metaphor or image you need to use, and get back to what do I need to focus on next.
And I like to go back to the areas of life that one person has, and we look at as a student athlete. Mm-hmm. As a coach, you look at your student athletes in 3 areas of life usually, and that is spiritual, mental, and physical. Mm-hmm. So I break those down into spiritual as a home life, mental as academics, and obviously physical as your athletics and as a practice goes. And if you're going to look at it as a college coach, these kids want to be here. Mm-hmm. So if they're unfocused, it's usually because something's unbalanced in their life. Everything is balanced in life. Mm-hmm. So if your academics aren't going well, something's wrong there, or something happened in your home life, your girlfriend broke up with you, parents getting a divorce, someone's fighting, you're fighting with siblings, those things can run over into your other areas of life. And so usually in the past of my 4 years being here, it's been those things. So it's it's a disbalance, and something's pouring in from another area of life.
So our 6th rep looks at, okay, what are our athletes doing Saturday night after a big tournament, or Thursday night after a big duel or tri-meet? So there's actually some research on, there's certainly research on the chronic effects of alcohol. So what do we mean by that? We mean, weeks and months and years of drinking. We certainly know there's, physiological effects on the body from weight gain to cardiovascular system to liver damage, those sorts of things. But there's actually some really interesting research, especially in athletic performance, that looks at the acute effects of alcohol. So one night of drinking, going out Saturday night or going out Thursday night. And what they've done in these studies, and I think these are actually really interesting studies that you can even get through an IRB and conduct with people. But anyway, in this case, so what they did is they brought 2 groups of individuals in. They brought one group in, and you're assigned to our placebo group. So you just get orange juice. Then we have our treatment group, if you will. They get orange juice and vodka. And then they complete some sort of an exercise. So in this case, they actually obliterated the quads in some sort of a isokinetic, basically leg extension assessment exercise. So they might have done like 200 reps, but really not that all that far off when we talk about wrestling an entire day, wrestling 4 or 5 matches in a Saturday tournament, and the fatigue and the muscle damage that occurs. So in this case, both groups drink their drink, perform the exercise, if you will, and then what we see here is that 36 hours later, just how much the placebo group has recovered compared to our alcohol group. And it's not until 60 hours later. So let's make this practical. 60 hours later, so that's 2.5 days. All right. So now we've got Sunday, after the night of drinking, we got Sunday night, Monday night into Tuesday morning. It's not until that point that these wrestlers are recovering. And so then what happens? Okay, well, if we back that up, they still haven't recovered by Monday. We come in for a team lift on Monday morning. Granted, the alcohol is out of their system by Sunday night. But physiologically, the muscles haven't recovered and super compensated by Monday morning. So now we come in for a team lift on Monday morning or a run. Now we're breaking the body back down. Then we come in, back in for afternoon practice and we grind and go hard. And so what we're talking about here is that ideally in this study, what we're seeing is that this is with, perfect rest and recovery, that it's 60 hours later. And these sort of studies have been replicated multiple times by Barnes and Associates, and other researchers, that from a physiological standpoint, the acute effects of drinking one night, how that influences and, inhibits the recovery process, particularly protein synthesis, and helping the muscles recover. So something to be mindful of as coaches, as we can educate our athletes with graphs like this, explain to them. Be mindful of what we're doing on a Saturday night off, what we put into our bodies. I think enough said there. Our 7th rep is a good one. Level your pride. Wrestlers, about any area of performance, coaches, we're notorious for this as well. We have an I can do it attitude, and we should have an I can do it attitude, but there is a downside to doing it all on my own. While being tough physically and mentally is important, there's a downside to that. There's actually a negative correlation. There's some research that suggests that as mental toughness increases, a lot of these athletes, a lot of these coaches, a lot of people that are great at what they do and are just hard as nails, they have a tendency to not open up to others. They have a tendency to play through. Pain is different, and I can almost see the eyes rolling when I say play through serious injury, because a lot of coaches, were there saying, well, they don't understand what the difference is between pain and injury. We got to teach them that. I get that. I'm with you. But there are those injuries that if we play through it, if we wrestle through it, it gets worse. And as coaches, that's so far on the others. Mentally tough wrestlers, that they will wrestle through a lot of those things because they don't want to miss time. They don't want other athletes. They don't want other wrestlers passing them by. And so third, they don't seek medical care. And those are issues. And I think as coaches, we need to be mindful of that. In the most extreme of examples, according to the CDC, suicide is the second leading cause amongst those wrestlers that we're coaching, 15 to 24 years old. It's a serious issue. I hope that no coach listening to this ever has to go through losing one of your wrestlers to suicide. Those of you that have had this kind of a scare or have had this happen before, it will absolutely rock your team. It will rock your world. It will change your outlook on mental health and how it affects adolescents today. So how can we prevent that? Well, I think as coaches, most certainly we can understand that, yes, we need to be building mental toughness. But could we integrate and understand and reframe mental toughness that a component of mental toughness is actually opening up to somebody? And that we understand that when we open up to others, it improves our mental health, it decreases the risk of suicide, and that doesn't necessarily have to be you as the coach. It could be an assistant coach, it could be one of their close friends, a pastor, it could be, aunt or uncle, whatever it might be. The key is, and I would encourage us as coaches, we need to be able to open up to other coaches as well. We need to have friends and others. We need to have mentors in life that we can talk to as well. The key there is that it's somebody that we trust and that's going to help us in a very non-judgmental way. Because when we do that, we keep ourselves from things escalating to the point where it blows up. Coaches, I'd like to suggest to our student athletes that really opening up, it's a life skill that really is a form of mental toughness in of itself. Rep number 8, back to what they're doing on Saturday night. So we talked about some of the research, if you will, on muscle recovery. And how acute bouts of exercise, how that influences or delays the recovery process, particularly protein synthesis, if you will. Well, acute bouts of drinking also influences sleep patterns or disrupts sleep patterns, if you will. So let's quickly just look at, okay, well, what does drinking do? even a few drinks, what does it do? Well, we know that there are essentially 5 stages of sleep, and the normal human body goes through these 5 stages. It's estimated maybe approximately every 90 minutes throughout the night. And so in a 90-minute span, we go through all 5 of these stages, and we cycle in and out of all 5 of those stages over the course of a night. So in an 8-hour night of sleep, we're going through each of these stages multiple times, if you will. Well, what happens when we drink? Well, we know that it speeds up how quickly we get into stage 1. Drink enough, you're going to fall asleep, pass out, whatever. But particularly stages 3, 4, and 5, as our body is cycling in and out of these stages, particularly stages 3, 4, and 5, we spend less time. So we spend more time in stage 1 and stage 2, and we spend less time in stages 3, 4, and 5. And it's actually really interesting because it's in these later stages where the body really begins to repair itself, okay, particularly stage 3. And I think the arrow is kind of covering that up. But essentially what we have here is that each stage is marked by certain cognitive developments or physiological developments. It's a time of recovery for the body. And if we're not spending as much time in stage 3, for example, we're not maximizing the recovery process. That's oftentimes when we've had a night of drinking why we wake up so restless. We might have slept 8 hours, but you feel like you nowhere close to 8 hours of sleep. Getting close to the end. 9th rep. Stop focusing on the matches that aren't yours. I'm not sure what else I should say about this other than, as coaches, we understand, okay, put yourself in the position of that state medal match or a really heated duel. You're sitting there on the side, you're coaching the heck out of your wrestlers, like you're bobbing and weaving, like your body feels the intensity of the match. It tightens up, we're in the action, like when we want our wrestlers to step a certain way, like our foot moves a certain way. Like that adrenaline is surging. We feel it after that match is over. We feel it after that duel is over. Our wrestlers experience the exact same emotional roller coaster. When we don't have the same level of intense energy when we walk out there if we've just been wrapped up in that match before ours. So Coach Wagner has some great recommendations on why this is a pet peeve of his.
My biggest pet peeve is you're at a tournament, and it might be an important one, and your wrestler's name is called, and sometimes I'll just watch those kids. And so they're in the hole on whatever mat. And so then they sit and they're watching the match in front of them. And then now they're on deck. And then they sit and watch the match that is in front of them. And then it's their turn to wrestle, and they haven't prepared physically or mentally for their upcoming match. And they're walking out there ready to wrestle. And I think that usually happens a lot with newer wrestlers, but even some of the older guys, they'll just be standing around kind of just waiting their turn. Mm-hmm. And I think that one thing that I think sports psychology and has shown, there's been so many advances in all these areas that being mentally prepared is almost as important as being physically prepared. So I always kind of felt like it was my job to, inform the wrestlers, hey, look, it's not like that mat. They're going to skip your match. If you walk over there in the corner and you jump rope or you do some push-ups or you shadow drill or whatever it takes to kind of get yourself jacked up and ready to go. But the match that's going on right before you means nothing. And, I think that's another part of a coach's responsibility is it's our responsibility to find out what it takes to get that wrestler going and get him prepared for them.
Well, we made it. We're at our 10th rep, which is talking about building mental toughness off the mat. I think sometimes as coaches, we're naturally biased because we think that our sport builds character, and it does. But research actually also suggests that that athletes and people in general sort of catch mental toughness along the way through their life experiences. That could be through a number of things. It can be through just challenging, difficult situations that we have to go through. growing up in a divorced family, or sibling rivalries, or playing other sports, or doing things in other clubs and activities. There's lots of ways that we catch mental toughness along the way. So we're going to hear of a couple of examples.
So I think more than anything, they kind of honed in on mental toughness. Like, I kind of developed more of a mental toughness in third grade when I joined basketball. So, like, I was the youngest on the team and one of the smaller ones. And so I knew that I had to just push if I wanted to play, like, a lot. And so I kind of figured it out. But then when I went to Air Force, like, they really kind of focused on push past what you're feeling and just get it done.
Your background. You were at UTC from 2002 to 2006. Is that right?
Yep.
Around
Those are my years.
And
yeah.
then,
So 2002 was a redshirt year. I wrestled as a freshman at George Mason University in 2001. And then redshirted for the year I transferred, to get with Terry. And, that's its own thing. Terry, the Terry Brands experiment.
Sure.
That was, we felt like experiments, we were, so, and kind of an odd thing of, that kind of got me there was almost faith, a buy-in, whatever you had to get to a place where, you break down, there you got, it's not about what I think anymore. What coach says, that's what I've got to do. And it doesn't matter whether I think I can or can't do something. I got to go do it. And there's going to be times you fail, but you hit that failure point and then you come back at it and do it again and then do it again and do it again until you succeed.
I think there's 4 basic steps. Basically, one, it starts with conditioning, developing, that a habit or that point to where you're working out past where you're comfortable, pushing yourself to another level. Basically, strength plays an important factor. Working out to develop muscles that will not only help you win matches, but also help you with that personal confidence and the technique and the countless hours spent drilling and honing those specific moves that you're going to use as a wrestler. And then last, but probably one of the most important, is that visualization and mindset that is just as important as the physical training. And if you don't believe that you put in what it takes to win, then you're more than likely not going to.
Let's sort of start bringing all this together. One, thank you to the coaches from across the state of Tennessee. If you're watching this from other states, thank you for being part of today's presentation. Thank you for supporting the NWCA, the National Wrestling Coaches Association. It does a phenomenal job putting conferences like this together to help support the ongoing education of coaches from around the country. What do I hope that you got from today's talk, today's presentation? Well, one, I hope you were at least halfway entertained by the interviews and enjoyed it. Two, I hope that you specifically take away skills and techniques that you can use with your wrestlers. Beyond that, specifically can use with your wrestlers to help them build mental toughness and be more focused in practice, be more focused in competition. As with that, any area of life where we have to perform, you perform as coaches on a daily basis. Every single day that you show up to practice, every day that you show up to competition, you're performing. And so as performers, the psychology of human performance applies in this case to not just our athletes, but our performance as coaches as well. So thank you again for being part of this. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, I hope that today's talk wasn't too sciencey, research-based. I've deliberately integrated that into the slides because I know that some coaches like to go back and look up some of that information. So everywhere throughout the presentation that you saw the book icon, that's kind of a research corner, if you will. I've tried to provide the references there. Here's a QR code for you. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, scan the QR code. It'll take you to a Google Doc page where there's a copy of the PowerPoint from today's presentation. There's my contact information, a list of references, and as well some supplemental resources that you might find interesting. So I know I already said it, but thank you again for the support. Thank you for being here today. Enjoy the rest of the conference.